welcome on stage, Klaus. And you're going to tell us a bit about APIs, how to get started with some of the questions that perhaps are not always asked, and how to get a good first start on building an API for your solution. Thanks for joining us today.
Pleasure.
Thanks for contributing to the day, and to everyone sitting out there. Please remember to register and so on, so you can ask the questions already now, and I'll be back up here with some questions, perhaps.
Perfect.
Yeah, take it away, Klaus.
Yeah. So yeah, hi everybody, hi people online. Welcome to this presentation about API first design in Django. I'm Klaus, and besides of the Germanish name, I'm actually Brazilian, so never mind my accent, bear with me. I've been using Django for a long time already. It's been a really lovely journey. And for the past 4 years, I have been writing APIs, more specifically REST APIs. And yeah, what's an API again? Just to be sure that we are all on the same page. And APIs can be described as that sort of, or at least web APIs can be described as that sort of URLs that are specialized to accept and return raw data or more specialized data. But they are not always the first thing that we think when this amazing idea comes, right? Sometimes we have this amazing to-do list app that we are trying to build, something different that no one tried before. We all do that. And we don't think about APIs from the first place, right? We usually start by coding. And that's actually an approach called known as code first, that we start by studying Django, right? I mean, we are in a Django conference, so yeah, that's the way we do. And then we start to sketch up some relationships in your database to make sure that our models are going to look pretty. And then we write code, and we write it well with test-driven development, and even some views, maybe using this full stack approach of Django that can do some server-side rendering and deliver some HTMLs. And eventually some API endpoints as well, because our front-enders, they want to make the application a bit more real-time. And then we deal with deployment and CI, CD, monitoring, logging. And then we start to talk about this with other stakeholders. For instance, a front-end guy that's working in your company, or a mobile developer that is trying to make this same version, this solution work on a mobile environment. And yeah, here is where integration problems can start. And I'm being a bit dramatic here. I would say a lot dramatic here, but it's a really good example. It happened before in the companies that I work for. And one of the reasons that Django is nowadays being used to write APIs, and it's being heavily used to that. And there are some explanations to that. One of that is the microservice architecture getting more and more popular. And another one is that the so-called web development, the modern web development way, we have specialized people doing it, like front-enders, back-enders, and we have this integration between those two teams or specialties. And that's why you would end up writing an API, even though you are using Django that is a full stack framework that can deliver HTML for you. So, okay, that's the connection between Django and APIs, but what is API first then? And it's not something new. It's being discussed in the web development world for a bit time. And I mean, that's the best explanation I would have. It's like thinking about the API first and designing it first before even coding. Again, a bit dramatic, but we will get there. Still too shallow, too vague. How can we be more accurate about this API first design principle idea? And there we go with 3 principles that at least help me figure out if I'm actually using it or not. properly. Again, principles, not rules, so it's not mandatory to follow all of them, but I'm sure that they are going to help you out with this idea. And the first one, your API is the first user interface of your application. And that can mean two things. The first one is that you shouldn't have anything else that's not covered by an API. And by that, I mean, you shouldn't have a front end that doesn't rely on an API, that is delivering some sort of use case or flow that doesn't have an API. Again, a bit strict, a bit dramatic. We don't need to be that strict about it. But it also means that you are actually bringing all the concerns that you would have with your front-end guy or even with your UX professional, the designer or the architect. We are thinking about it when we are designing the solution and bringing it to the context of building an API instead of an user interface. So in other terms, we would say like, yeah, we should invest not the same amount of time that we invest building user interfaces, but we should invest some time on building APIs as well. The second one, your API comes first, then the implementation. And this here is to make sure that you are not doing the code first approach. You are trying to be more design driven here. And with that, we can actually, we have different tools to help us out with that. I'm going to talk about some of them later. But the idea is actually like, let's think about the API and let's give it the proper importance and let's care about coding later. And number three, your API is described and maybe even self-descriptive. And that means that means documentation. And there is no other way to say that, but yeah, documentation. We should be caring about that. We should be caring about how the developer, the guy that's going to use our API, how can we make him more comfortable about it and provide as much information about it as possible. And by self-descriptive, maybe we can add some metadata to our API like we do when we use JSON schema hypermedia, for instance. So the API itself is providing some context so the user can actually navigate through how different endpoints and understand some actions that he or she can do. But by the end of the day, it's about caring for other developers. And at least for me as a developer, my point of view regarding API first is developer experience. And we can summarize it as if you're caring, if you're dealing with developer experience and trying to improve it, you're actually somehow practicing API first. And one thing that I like about this whole idea, this whole concept, is that you can have different points of view here. For instance, for an architect, it means that we are going to have a platform, a cohesive platform that's going to provide solutions for different clients, and we don't need to repeat ourselves. So you're going to be in a good shape. But for marketing, for instance, and sales, it's a different channel of distribution. So we might have some economic impacts by doing that instead of caring or of developing the API afterwards. And, well, how can we connect everything with Django? Of course, we are in a Django conference. And one of the things that I like most about this Python and Django is that you have this dynamic environment that it's hard to have in different languages and frameworks. So let's get started. The following slides, they are based on a process suggested by Jennifer Riggins in an article that she wrote for Programmable Web. And she has this really amazing idea about how we should do that in order to make sure that we are following API first principles. So it's an adaptation of that, it's based on that, and I think it works really well with Python and Django. So the first step is design the API. Yeah, we are talking about API first, so design the API is possibly the first thing that we should do. And at this step, we need to understand the requirements, we need to know the stakeholders when possible, and set some standards. For instance, are we going to be REST, RESTful, JSON API? What are we going to do? And they start to define some behaviors that can be crucial to your business logic. And this document here, yeah, it can be seen there. This document here is an API blueprint example. It's a request feature change written with API blueprint, which is a specification language that works on top of Markdown. So it's relatively easy to write and read, and you can describe how your API is going to behave based on the specification. There are other options available like Swagger or Ramo or even OpenAPI specification. That is the most recent version of Swagger so far. But you don't need to be that fancy. I mean, you can just sketch up some JSON payloads and you are going to be fine. But the thing is, you are starting to consider different use cases and flows and discussing it with stakeholders, again, when possible. If you have a front-end guy in your team, or if you have a provider or some sort of third party that's going to integrate with you, it would be nice to have them as part of this process as you can. And the next step is the validation. It works like some sort of proof of concept that we do sometimes by coding. And the idea here is that once you have this idea, you should be able to validate it with your stakeholders. And by that, we can use some mock servers. Prism is one example that based on the specification you wrote before with a formal language, you can run a mock server and they can use it. They can integrate the mobile or the web app without any line of code being written in the backend server. But yeah, Django, again, Python Django, it's so dynamic, so lightweight, and it's perfect for prototyping, right? So here is an example of a static view written with Django that you can just pick some static data and static payload that you agreed with your peers, with the stakeholders, and pretend that you have a final code written. So they can start working on their side, and you can start working on your side in parallel. And it's a perfect world. It's almost utopic, but still, it's a good idea to avoid the integration and contract problems that you're going to have by the end of the process if you don't think about them as early as possible. And test often, automate when possible. And there is this tool called Dread. It's a really interesting one. It's a command line tool that you can use an OpenAPI specification document or API blueprint document and point it against a service that you have. And it's going to validate if that specification, that contract that you wrote is still valid. So it's some sort of API testing in the pyramid test. But still, it's a really good one to have in your CI and to make sure that you are not breaking the contract. You're not, the contract is still valid, so your clients, your customers are still able to use your API. And finally, we can start coding, right? And yeah, pick Django. And if you're going to write APIs with Django, I would say go for Django REST Framework, because it's a really cool library that's going to solve a lot of problems for you out of the box. And here we have four different elements that shows how easy it is to build an API with REST Framework. We start with our Django model, then we go to a serializer that is a REST Framework element that's going to translate requests to model operations and vice versa. And we have the view set that's going to connect everything. It provides us a create, replace, and delete set of endpoints. And the last part is like we are connecting it to Django so we can access it through the Django router. So it's actually pretty nice. If you haven't tried Django REST Framework before, it's really awesome. Sometimes we will face this problem of over and underfetching, mainly with REST APIs. And that means that overfetching, for instance, is like you have this endpoint that's providing an amount of data, And your client, he simply doesn't care about it. Like, for instance, a mobile version of your application that doesn't use every single information you have in your endpoint. So how can you avoid this? And as we saw before, it has other impacts like bandwidth that is being used and shouldn't be, and also some ecological impacts as well, as we saw before. So how can we prevent this kind of thing from happening? And Django REST framework has this add-on, this plugin, I would say, called Flex Fields, which can allow you to specify which fields you want to be in your payload. In this case, I would just want the title, so that's what's going to happen, and that's what's the endpoint is going to return for me. There are some other options. You could write a specific version of your endpoint for your mobile client, for instance, with less information. It's still valid. Or you can consider a different protocol, a different technology that's not REST. And that's okay. API first is not about writing RESTful APIs. API first is about developer experience. And if GraphQL is going to provide your customers a better developer experience than a RESTful set of endpoints, why not? And that might happen, like you might conclude that WebSockets is the answer, or even gRPC, who knows? So it's not, you're going to Google about it, and you're going to see a lot of articles talking about REST APIs under this API first design umbrella, but it's not about REST at all. It's about the API itself, and it's about developer experience. It's official, now it's time to release, and this step here, we are making that agreement, that sort of ideas and proof of concepts, we are turning it into something official. And it should happen before, because if you follow Jennifer Ringing's article again, this should be happening after test. But I mean, we have some really cool tools in Django, in the Django environment, so why not do this here? And with REST framework, URI template, and PyYAML, we can have this really awesome generate a schema, a task in your manage.py that's going to generate this open API specification document based on the elements that you already have in your code, the model, the serialize, and the views. So why not, right? And this is useful because this document is readable by humans and by machines as well. So it's easy to share. You can send it to, I don't know, the third party that's going to integrate with you. So they are going to have an idea how your API is going to look like. They can use some SDK generators that read this specification and generate, I don't know, Kotlin code based on that. It's still a topic, but yeah, it can work. And we suddenly start to deal with changes, right? That happens a lot in a REST environment, a set of in APIs using REST, sorry. And Django REST framework, they provide this engine for versioning, and you have different options here. You can use the path, like /v1 / your resource, or you even using query string. And headers, why not? I think GitHub uses headers as well. It's quite neat. Or not, or you don't care about versioning, and yeah, you don't do versioning at all. And my way of thinking here is that even though you have full control of your server side and client side, I think you should start with at least a v1 / because suddenly your API is going to grow and you're going to break a lot of contracts. So you might need to start using version, and the redirects are going to be a mess, like redirecting for a standard URL that you had before to a version URL that you now have. So consider using it sooner, and consider using it from the start. But still, if you have full control of your server and your client, I don't think you should care that much about it. It's too much of a hustle. And now it's time to release. And here, again, we are talking about documentation. Release is not just about code being production in this context. Release is about any artifact that we are building that are going to turn it easy. Thank you. Turn it easier to the user to use your solution they are going to be inside this step as well. And by documentation with this library that I don't dare trying to say its name because my English. So, but with this library here, you have this visual interface out of the blue. So it's just a matter of installing it, a bit of configuration in Django. Of course, if you use Django REST framework, you're going to have it. You can interact with it and see how your endpoints are going to behave. It's really nice to have it. A lot of, I don't know about you, but like looking at Stripe or even Twilio, they have those developer portals that are really awesome and provide a lot of content, a lot of information that are really useful. So you have the opportunity to do that in a sort of automated way. And the engagement part, one of the last parts here, we are almost there. I rushed a bit. So the engagement part, it's again, we should be investing as much time as we invest in visual interface in our APIs. So the engagement part is the part that you go out there, you start to collect feedbacks and monitor your API and see how you can improve it. Tradeshift is a startup here in Copenhagen, and they have this developer center. It's really cool, and I worked there for a while. So they have this really interesting concept of building the documentation automatically. So every single release, they have it updated, and it's really nice. Everything works on top of Swagger files, so machines can integrate. A developer experience team has been formed just to make sure that they are providing, I'm not working there anymore, but they are providing the best experience as possible to developers. And repeat, you don't need to be waterfall about it. You can use every single agile methodology or framework you can be incremental here. And for the readings, it's actually we are actually almost there, so almost lunchtime. I wrote an article about API first, and which is more based on Jennifer Riggins' results and the research that she has been doing about it. It doesn't talk about Python or Django, but still a really good reference if you're looking for the reference for this talk, they are there. How to design great APIs. This is the article that I've been talking about from Jennifer Riggins. It's really interesting because besides of the process that I just kind of showed here, she also talks about some economic axioms that you might face with API first. So it's a really interesting article to be aware about. And the book from William Vincent, a lot of ideas for this talk are from this book. So if you are willing to write Django, APIs with Django, it's a really nice one. Go for it. The API first section here is awesome. Okay, it's been too early, but lunchtime is always as every time. So I'll be around if you have any story about documentation, APIs, and developer experience. I'll be around, and for you people, I'll be on Zoom. Thank you.
Super cool. Thank you so much, Klaus. I'm just waiting to see if there's any questions that are gonna hop in from the internet. Meanwhile, I have a question, perhaps related to the talk coming up later about documentation and these APIs. Code first, or perhaps documentation first? I know there is a lot of automated framework, perhaps for building your documentation directly out of your API. Is that a way to frame it?
Not sure if I got it. Can you rephrase the question?
Can we build our documentation of the API before as a kind of design?
Yeah, we can. We can start by, if we consider the API as something apart from the implementation, we have to give it some meaning. And by some meaning, we will probably start writing specifications that can be attached any kind of, we have a lot of tools out there that generate documentation, validate if the contract is right or wrong, and even generate code based on Swagger files, for instance. So having this kind of approach, writing, writing the specification first, and then starting to implement it, it can provide you this kind of benefit. You can you can automate a lot of different aspects. Documentation is one of them, and generate developer portals as we saw here. And Swagger, the Swagger environment, they have a lot of tools regarding this, and they have even web apps that do that. You don't even need to have a CI, for instance, that point to somewhere. You just can upload a Swagger file, and they will build this documentation for you. But with the proposal here, the process that I showed, we mix, right? Because we don't actually just write the implementation and then and forget about the code. We are kind of mixing because Django, with Django REST framework, they have these sort of tools that will allow you to provide it based on the elements that you already have. And that's one of the things that API first can be a burden, because if we are writing the specification first and then the code, we might have some sort of duplication in some way. So with this here, you are going to rely, everything is going to be around the modules, the views, and the serializers that you are already writing in Django, and they are already, you are doing a lot of work on that, describing them a lot. So why not just use them and generate the specification based on those elements?
Mm. I can't wait to get started and try out this new approach. It's a new, also perhaps for me, a new way of thinking where I want to start building a solution. I think people are perhaps thinking a lot about lunch. We need to refuel a little bit. But a couple of, firstly, we're both wearing almost the same t-shirt, but yours is unique. That's one of the perks of being a speaker here. If you're interested in this latest Django design, which is made by Sarah, who's also drawing sketch notes for the talks right now, you're welcome to send us a message on Zulip. This is special production, so we don't want to invest in anything that there's no demand for, but please just reach out to us. And we have a sort of book raffle open on Zulip. There is a publisher called Manning Publications that are writing books about Python, and they are raffling away 5 books. And if you want to join the raffle, you add your name to the topic. I think add it in the Django Day channel. And there's also a code for having discounts there. We're gonna have a lunch break now, and for those of you at the venue, that means that the lunch will be outside. And that's the next meal, but perhaps you are a very organized person and you're also thinking one more meal ahead. I'm gonna be out in the rain picking up some coupons for ordering at another place, and I'm gonna bring them back during the lunch break here. And I'll explain that to you when we resume, how that works. And I think, thank you once again, Klaus, so much for this. And yep, see you all. Let me just see, what time are we coming back? We are coming back at 1:15. See you then.